Hey, good afternoon. We're going to do a little bit of a critique on a video that uh, it was an interview that was done yesterday by former architects and engineers founder Richard Gage, and he interviewed Barbara Honegger. Um, Barbara Honegger served under the Reagan administration and is also a proponent of many fringe conspiracy theories about 9/11 that are just demonstrably false. And today's video, I took an excerpt. They did an interview yesterday, which lasted 2 hours. I'm not going to show you the whole 2 hours. In fact, the video I took out, the part of the video is the 14 minutes long, and it caters to Honegger's assertions that the planes that took off out of Dulles and Logan were not the planes that crashed into the Pentagon or in the World Trade Center. In fact, they were swapped by remote control technology, landed somewhere, and then drone aircraft made to look like Boeing airliners then crashed into the Pentagon and Shanksville. But Honegger also doesn't think a plane hit the Pentagon. She thinks a bomb blew up and the plane actually crashed into the heliport. I mean, her positions regarding these regarding the World Trade Center Pentagon always shift slightly a bit, so it's never the same. Nevertheless, I'm going to easily show her position to be quite false. So what we're going to do is I'm going to play this video. I'll move myself over here, down here, or up over here. So what I'll do is I will play the video and we'll stop it and see from there. Let's see what's going on.
So, all right. So now this is getting into my own research. So evidence, so this is just some of the evidence. In a podcast like this, I can't go into all of it, but I'll be giving you the.
Well, I mean, let me stop you right there. In terms of a podcast, you had 2 hours. I mean, it's not like no one's stopping you from providing all the evidence. If you're showing some evidence, but you don't actually show any evidence whatsoever, and I'll show that.
The sources of my publications that people can read at your leisure. But this is just some of the evidence that at least two of the planes, the World Trade Center 2 plane and the Pentagon plane, in my studied opinion, were hijacked by
studied opinion. Remember what words matter. So right. So in her studied opinion, you not see the problem already, right? I don't care about your opinion. You're making a statement of fact that Flight 175 and 77 were not hijacked planes. They were drone made to look like planes. You're saying that as a statement of fact, and your evidence is your opinion.
Remote control technology. They were then landed by that remote control technology and then swapped, traded out for different planes that were then also remote controlled into the targets. Okay, that is what I believe is the modus operandi.
That's what I believe. You got to listen when people talk. Listen to the wording. Try to, right? It's my belief. That's what she said. Before that, she says, in my estimated opinion or my studied opinion. Remember what the words, opinion, belief. She never said it is through fact. It is through knowledge that I can provide. She didn't say, oh, this is a fact. She said, it's my belief. So her statements regarding 175 and 77, she's telling you her opinion. And yet Gage doesn't challenge this because Gage doesn't listen.
Of the inside job attacks of 9/11. So what is some of this evidence? What is some of the evidence that the World Trade Center 2 plane, the one
called United Airlines Flight 175,
that hit World Trade Center 2, was not Flight 175, which is the official story. And that,
you see, her again, right? Her opinions and beliefs are going to dictate from now on what she thinks about what happened with 175 and 77. Remember that. And she made this right on the outset. She stated this.
That's one of the planes that left Boston Logan Airport originally. All right. There's testimony of multiple witnesses, including two that I know that you know well, Ricky DeSantis.
Yeah, we had him on the show.
Yeah, you had him
Earlier.
on the show recently, and I helped you with some of the background information for that. So that includes Ricky DeSantis and his former, one of his former top officers in his company in Wall Street on 9/11, Miriam Baza, who spoke at, I believe it was the 2014 New York City anniversary event. And there are other witnesses, but they are two of those witnesses who've gone on record that the World Trade Center 2 plane was gunmetal gray. It was completely gray.
Completely gray, right? That's coming from eyewitness report, Ricky DeSantis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you what United Airlines plane looks like, right? So I'm going to actually, okay, that's what a United Airlines plane looks like. 175. Dark blue underbelly, gray on top. This is what she thinks. She's telling you that, you know, because the plane was gray, and by the way, plane was reaching up to speeds up to 536 miles an hour. And I think it hit it 563 miles an hour, right? So the plane, when it reached the point of impact, was going up to speeds of 563 miles an hour. Not that the plane was constantly going at that speed, because it wasn't. It only reached that speed seconds before impact, right? And this is what a United Airlines plane looks like. This is what it looks like here, right? So let me blow this up a little bit, okay? This is what 175 looked like before it hit the South Tower. Now they're claiming that this blue underbelly, or right here, this area is a pod. That's what Jason Burmis thinks. This is what Barbara Honegger is asserting in the video, right? What pod? Where's the pod? I don't see it here. Want me to blow it up more? Where is it? Where's the pod? Here's the sun. This is the part of the sun. So that's not part of the pod. Look, see bright lights? That's where the sun is. See this right here? So that's not a pod. There is no pod on this plane. So let's keep going.
There has been a professional digital analysis of what appears to be a pod at the bottom of the fuselage of that plane from the video. And of course, a pod under the fuselage is not part of any commercial airliner at all.
No, that would be right.
As
Because
definitive,
there was none. Because there was none. Here, I want me to show you again? Here. I will share this video. I will screen share the picture again. Here, Flight 175. Where's the pod? If you're saying this right here because this white light is right here, is a pod? No, because that white light's right here, 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 here. It's the sun hitting the dark blue underbelly. It's coming from a video too. So no, there is no pod. Where do you get that from, right? You just made it up. In fact, just like I said before, when you hear somebody talk, listen to their words, right? At no point did she provide evidence for a pod being on this plane. Now, what she said, she's saying, right? She's asserting that Flight 175 took off out of Logan, okay? At some point, this plane was then landed by remote controlled technology, in which she didn't provide evidence for that either. She just asserted it. And then that plane landed somewhere and it was swapped. Another plane took off, which was a drone aircraft with a pod underneath made to look like a Boeing airliner. Now, drones aren't this big. This is a huge plane. Drones are very small. In fact, the biggest drone in the world, I think, is 61 feet wide. Boeing Airlines is 136 feet wide. And don't quote me on that. I could be off by a couple of feet, but I believe it's like 126 and 134, 134 feet wide. So not only that, she actually thinks that the plane then took off and crashed, and that drone aircraft then crashed into the World Trade Center and Pentagon, or the heliport at the Pentagon. She provides no evidence. What documentation, what eyewitnesses saw a plane take off out of wherever she thinks it took off? She doesn't even explain that. Maybe she will in the video. So let's do that. Let's see if she actually is going to provide evidence for that.
Being a true physical object. In other words, it's not just a reflection or some kind of artifact of the video. And that has been done by one of our colleagues in our Europe 9/11 group, as you know. The big one to me are the deep basement explosion or explosions that have been documented by seismic evidence. And
that's false. There's no seismic evidence to show for that. Now, were there explosions in the basement? Yes, there were, because eyewitness reports, and that's, you could see that on YouTube regarding, and I have the news reports on my own playlist where you could hear people basically being interviewed by, I think it was Eyewitness News, ABC, where they're basically saying, in the basement levels, saying that they heard additional explosions down there.
Expert seismic analysis, as well as Willie Rodriguez's testimony. Well, no, he wasn't in World Trade Center 2. He was in World Trade.
Now, what this obviously has anything to do with remote control technology, drones with pods underneath, I have no idea. None whatsoever. It has no affiliation whatsoever.
Center 1, but by eyewitness testimony that there was a deep basement explosion or explosions.
See, she'll refer to eyewitness testimony when it's convenient for her to provide an assertion, right? But when there's over 88 people who witnessed an American Airlines plane crash into the Pentagon, oh no, those eyewitnesses don't count because they didn't see that and they're lying.
17 seconds in the deep basement of World Trade Center 2 before the plane hit stories and stories and stories up above, after which the plane, 17 seconds later, had to impact the tower, as its impact and the fires therefrom was the cover story for the controlled demolition, which was the real reason for the collapse.
I will quote you, Danny Jowenko, the Dutch demolition expert, who basically said that World Trade Centers 1 and 2 were not demolitions. And I know the Truth Movement loves to quote Danny Jowenko regarding Building 7, but they don't quote him for 1 and 2 because he doesn't even think they were demolitions. That's coming from the demolition expert the Truth Movement basically uses as evidence for a demolition at World Trade Center 7.
But which at that time, 17 seconds before, that plane was still far enough away that a real human pilot could have diverted it, and that could not be allowed. Therefore, it had to have been remote controlled.
Okay, so her assertion is that if there was a human being behind the plane, it could have been diverted, right? That the plane could have been remotely guided into the World Trade Center. Well, if that's the case, basically, I don't necessarily disagree. Is that that the planes were hijacked, and without the hijacker's knowledge, that the planes were then taken over by remote control technology to ensure that the planes crashed into those targets. That's a really rational scenario. Now, I don't know anything about remote control technology. I do know that in 2006, Boeing was awarded the rights for the uninterruptible autopilot. That technology actually existed even pre-2001. But again, this is what Dan Hanley suggests, right, for a pilot. He basically says that there's no need for hijackers when you have remote control technology. Well, yes, you do need hijackers because you have people on the planes who basically made phone calls and said, hey, we're being hijacked. Unless, Barbara Honegger actually thinks that none of the planes actually had calls because they were all faked or they were all manipulated or they were all coerced in some Air Force hangar. That's what Rebecca Roth actually believes. All of this is speculation. It's evidence against the contrary, right? The evidence shows that the people did get phone calls, and they were made on airphones and some were made on cell phones, and that these people did receive calls, and there was a number of people that received calls, mainly from Flight 93. In fact, there were more calls on Flight 93 than there were on any other hijacked airplane. But there were hijackers, and there were hijacked airliners, and there's evidence to suggest that there were. I mean, I want me to pull it up. I could stay here for another 30 minutes. You could basically look that up on my channel. It's on the playlist. I provide that evidence for you. Honegger doesn't. She basically asserts things. And people who are no planers, people who don't believe planes were hijacked or planes crashed anywhere on 9/11, they'll believe her. Like, they'll believe her. And she, remember what I said before, what she said originally. She says, it is my studied opinion. What does she say after that? It is my belief. She didn't say, this is a fact from ascertained knowledge, from information. She didn't say, this is a demonstrable fact. She said it's a belief. Well, you can believe whatever you want. An opinion is not a statement of fact, it's an opinion.
Now, when I first mentioned this analysis, which is
Now, if that's the case, if there were planes that were remotely controlled, then why didn't Flight 93 crash into, say, the White House or the Capitol? Crashed into a field in Shanksville. So I don't know what to tell you. I mean, is it because the people were almost at the controls of the cockpit, and that's the reason why they crashed into the field? Like they remotely guided into the field? Could be. Because then they would say, hey, there's only 2 hijackers in this plane cockpit. They killed one guy outside the door. And that's coming from the victims' families who heard the cockpit voice recorder during the Zacharias Moussaoui trial of 2006. One guy outside the door, 2 in the cockpit. Hey, how many is that? 3. Well, we've been told by the FBI and the 9/11 Commission report that there were how many? 4. Oh, I think we should start asking questions. But guess what? Those questions won't be asked if you don't believe in hijackers or hijacked planes. And thus, you won't get into the real anomalies. And in Flight 93, the anomaly is Ziad Jarrah. But God forbid, if you looked into his background, his family background anyway, you might see something that is of enormous value. But if you don't believe in hijackers, why would you look into the profiles of people that you don't believe in? Which leads me to, to question about Honegger's motives.
my own. In conclusion, to Willie Rodriguez at the big, one of the big conferences in June 2016 in Los Angeles, 9/11 conferences. He jumped up and down like a little boy and came out from around the table and pulled his key, his master key to the World Trade Center 1 out and let me hold it and ask.
All this is irrelevant to the point regarding the slot. Evidence, at least 2 of the planes were hijacked by remote control technology, landed and swapped for planes, then remote controlled to their targets. So far, her evidence is this slide. She's not made any references to any links, any articles, any documents, any files. She has not said anything of the sort. So she's talking about Willie Rodriguez and explosions in the basement of World Trade Center, which have no relevance to this slide, none whatsoever. But that's what happens when you don't have evidence for your claims, and then you have to go off on a different tangent or a story to basically confuse the listener.
Me to kiss it.
And by the way, incidentally enough, Willie Rodriguez actually blocks people on Facebook if you promote no planes and no hijackers. So that, I think that's kind of ironic.
So that was another one of my kind of major moments in 9/11 truth. So now moving on to just
Well,
some
wait a
of the
second.
evidence.
I
Go ahead.
have a comment on this,
Yeah,
Barbara.
go ahead.
The 17-second delay doesn't mean that the plane.
You see, now, Gage, you make a mistake here, right? You let the person present the argument. The comments come at the end, not during, because it just interferes with the presentation.
Were swapped.
No, it doesn't. No, we'll get to that. That's totally different.
Well, it
That's
says
totally
this is
separate.
under the heading, the World Trade Center 2 plane wasn't flight 175. It could have been flight 175 and still had bombs going off in the building before the
Oh,
plane.
yes,
hit.
absolutely. We will get to that. I can't get everything on one slide, but this is just a piece of evidence that whatever plane it was, and we'll get to that, that whatever plane it was, whether it was 175 or a swap plane, this nevertheless applies to that plane. Okay, so if there's a deep basement explosion 17 seconds before whatever plane it was hit, that plane had to impact. It could not be allowed to miss the tower or be diverted from the
It almost did. Flight 175 almost missed the World Trade Center tower. Actually, it almost crashed into two other planes on its way to the World Trade Center. I forgot the name of those planes, but the pilots actually were warned by FAA in New York. I'm sorry, Air Traffic Control in New York, that basically said, move out of the way. This plane is wayward, and we can't get in contact with it. Nobody's contacting air traffic control regarding the pilot of 175, and it basically almost missed the World Trade Center, South Tower, and basically hit on an angle, and that's why that tower fell first, because it hit at an angle, almost missing it by a mere feet.
tower by a real pilot.
Well, that could have been an accident. I mean, the 17 seconds does sound like a mistake on somebody's part, because they wouldn't want to be obvious about bombs going off before the planes hit. So it's
Well,
not an indicator that it was a military plane.
No, I'm not saying it is. I'm trying to say it's not I'm not making any claim about what the plane was in this particular
Right.
piece.
Yes, you are. You already did. You're basically questioning whether 175 was the actual plane. And anybody could look into your past videos. You don't believe any of the planes were hijacked. You said that repeatedly. And like I said before, I mean, you tend to change your speculative ideas over time. I heard you say sometimes, well, yeah, the planes that did take off were actually hijacked, but then they were swapped in midair. I've heard you say that you don't believe that they were even hijacked at the airports. So it's like, no one really can pinpoint your position. I mean, they could generally can, but they can't say, oh yeah, I know what she thinks. This is her, or this and that. It always changes over time. And that's why nobody should be following her for 9/11 information, because nothing she says is demonstrably true.
Piece of evidence.
The pilot, if the bomb did go off in the building, it was down in the basement too. He wouldn't have never seen it. He wouldn't have, well, anyway, we're speculating.
But you're speculating all throughout the presentation, which is so far 5 minutes in. Everything you said was speculation in this, Honegger. And Gage, stop interrupting stop interrupting the presentation. You wait until after the presentation is done, then you take comments and questions.
My point here, Richard, is that this is reason to believe that there was no human pilot in control.
See, there you go, right there, right? She doesn't believe there were human pilots at the controls. Now, how would she know this?
That's my point. That this is just another piece of evidence that this particular plane was remote controlled. And as I mentioned to Willie Rodriguez before he jumped out from around the table with the master key to the World Trade Center 1, I said, Willie, this is evidence that the very same person or individuals who were controlling the plane also detonated the explosives.
I mean, what a remarkable statement when you think about it, right? Like I said, remember, listen, all right? She said a statement, and she's saying it as a statement of fact, that the persons in control of remotely guiding the planes were also in charge of the detonations in the World Trade Center. What's her evidence for that?
It had to be the same group of inside perpetrators.
She doesn't even name names. She said it has to be the perpetrators, inside perpetrators. Who are they? What information are you using, which can be shown to the public, that you think that the same people who remotely guided the planes, which would be Dob Zakheim for you, were also in charge of detonating the World Trade Center in the basement?
Once those
If you had your button on the explosive device, you probably time them so that they happen simultaneously. And that would be the
yes.
obvious
They-
solution to that.
yes,
What
but
evidence are
that's-
you using?
That's still, you're still making an argument that it's the same group of insiders who are responsible for both, in my opinion.
I don't care about your opinion, right? I want to know what you know. Imagine going to court. Imagine having Honegger go to court and say, this is my opinion. I think this and this, this. It's my belief that this happened. Can you imagine the embarrassment? You know, she would be escorted out of the court. But this is what the truth movement is getting behind, because she's part of the lawyers committee for 9/11 inquiry. Why they would have her on board, I have no idea. Can you imagine that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay, okay. So moving on to the Pentagon plane was,
Whoa, wait a minute. Where's your evidence to suggest any of this? We're going to 77 already. Hey, anybody out there, if you're a truther, right? If you're a truther, and I'm not making fun of you, it's not you. You're a victim in all this, right? If you follow Barbara Honegger, I want to know what evidence she's using to suggest that Flight 175, one, was remotely guided into where, right? She doesn't state where it landed, right? Two, that all the people got off of that plane, made phone calls at where? Three, that a plane, which was a drone outfitted with a pod underneath, took off and made to look like a Boeing airliner, took off out of where? And that crashed into the South Tower. What evidence does she suggest for this? She didn't provide any evidence. She just said it because that's where her presentation said. There's no references here. What evidence is she using for any of this? Do you guys question that? Do you question that? If you don't, how do you call yourself a truther? If you don't look at 9/11 like an independent investigator, where you're going to interview people, you're going to look at evidence, you're going to collect evidence and data, and then basically what you don't have the luxury to do is basically say, well, I'm going to interview somebody who wasn't even there and who's going to give me their opinion, because that's Barbara Honegger. She didn't even imply anything about 175 and the swapping of planes with any evidence whatsoever. She just asserted that. That doesn't make you question. Well, then don't call yourself a truther, because you're not.
the evidence that the Pentagon plane, this is just some of it, was in Flight 77. And I know that this is, in dispute. And I would like to say here that one of the reasons that the whole discussion about or debate about the plane or no plane or which plane at the Pentagon is happening is because the Pentagon and the government has intentionally withheld the videos that will.
What evidence do you have that the government is intentionally withholding video evidence, right? Even let's be honest here. If the government somehow had evidence to show a plane actually hit the Pentagon and they released it, you would actually say, and this is speculation on my part, but I'm almost confident that you would basically say, well, you see, they doctored the video. That's actually CGI. That's what you would probably say. Oh, they implemented the plane, subverted the plane into the video, and you could see it crash into the Pentagon. It's all government affiliated. So, I mean, let's be honest here. You're a no-planer through and through, right? You're never going to change your mind, Honegger, because if you do, you're basically going to get the same treatment afforded to Wayne Costi and David Chandler, who I have no idea why they would even want to be affiliated with you, even in their email exchanges, because you basically led the attack on their person for the last 12, 13 years. And you never made any type of reputation video to Wayne Costi's brilliant 5-hour video showing how a plane actually crashed into the Pentagon. I mean, 5 hours. And you've made no reputation video for that. So your opinions about, Flight 77 are, worthless, because look what you did for 175. You didn't provide any evidence to show that it was actually a drone outfitted to look like Flight 175 with a pod underneath. You showed no evidence for this. Nothing, not even, no pictures, no files, no documents, no eyewitness evidence. You basically said, oh, Ricky DeSantis saw a great plane. United Airlines Flight 175 is dark blue underneath and dark gray on top. If the plane is going 560 miles an hour, yeah, by the time you look up, you're basically seeing a blur. And what are you going to see? A blob of dark blue and gray.
Once we get them out.
That's
through
your
Freedom of
evidence.
Information Act request, which the
It doesn't take more than 5 minutes to refute anything she says. That's why she won't debate like me or DJ Thermal Deadner or Ryan Dawson. She doesn't debate. She lives on Facebook, and she basically goes to, fringe channels that basically don't care about her evidence or information, right? Because she has none. They all agree on one thing, that, yeah, hey, by the way, we'll believe anything you believe because we hate the official narrative. And to them, the official narrative is only that, 4 planes were hijacked and they crashed into World Trade Center, Pentagon, Shanksville, and there were 19 hijackers in the controls. To them, that's the official narrative. And that's like this much of the official narrative, right? Because they never read the 9/11 Commission Report, which is available on my WordPress, because I'm uploading page by page where you could read it to your disposal at your leisure. Read it. Am I suggesting that that's what happened? No, but I'm providing you a service for free where basically you can understand what they're saying in the 9/11 Commission Report. And it's not just about 4 planes or 19 hijackers. It's about what's not in the report. And that would take time out of your busy day, right? Because you would have to look at documents and files and profiles of people you don't even believe in. If you don't believe in hijackers, then you basically absolved the NSA, the CIA, the Israeli Mossad, the Saudi GID. These are all intelligence services, foreign and domestic, who were monitoring, who were assisting who? The hijackers and their affiliates. And when you realize this, you're basically going to say, wow, what the hell was I believing all these years? And there are some, but it's not like an overwhelming number. But to the 9/11 Truth Movement, how can you even blame them for foreknowledge, let alone complicity for 9/11 when you don't have hijackers? If there's no hijackers, there's no Alex station, which is the CIA virtual station. That means the NSA didn't have a wiretap on bin Laden's phone or in the Yemen hub in Yemen 6 years prior to the events, because that's what they were listening to for 6 years. Who are they listening? If there's no hijackers, then there's no reason to listen to Osama bin Laden and Al-Qaeda, who are blamed for 9/11. They're not to blame. Who are we blaming? Dov Zakheim with an Atari joystick in the basement levels of his house, remotely guiding planes like this? It's infantile. And to the Truth Movement, this is what I'm hoping to promote the message to. It's not so much, the people that are serious researchers like DJ Thermoden and Ryan Dawson. These, that's an echo chamber, right? They already know that the planes were hijacked and the intelligence services were. This is not to them. This is to the Truth Movement, who basically listen to Barbara Honegger. She's not providing any evidence so far for anything she says here so far.
Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry is going to be doing in the very near future. Once we get those videos, hopefully, they will actually show what's happening. And
actually, I don't need a video to know what happened at the Pentagon. In fact, let me just show you, right? Instead of just looking for Barbara Honegger, you weren't even there, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play some videos, which I'm going to share with you here, about people who were actually there.
There was a rush, feeling the
This guy, he's a priest, Father Stephen McGraw, right?
Vibrations or the sound. I just know there was an overwhelming sense of something coming over the tops of our cars. The plane clipped a light pole as it went over the highway, and I turned instinctively to my right, and to see just in time the plane coming in and just crashing into the building right in front of me.
Well, okay, that's one, right? Okay. There are others. Here's another one. This is Lieutenant Colonel Brian Birdwell. He was actually inside the second floor of the Pentagon. Let's hear what he has to say.
Going out to go to the men's restroom that morning, I actually walked through this pathway, took a left up the building, went to the gentleman's room, came out, and was on my way back to the office. And so had I stepped out to the men's restroom a little sooner, I would have been in the path of the plane. On my return from the restroom, had I stepped out any later, I would have been in the path of the plane going to the restroom. My intent is not to go into the graphic details of the events, the hardships that my wife and I faced, but rather to discuss with you the larger issues, a more strategic view of why this country has the
And
resiliency
he was burned
and
60%
strength.
over his body. Okay. 87 eyewitness accounts before and after American Airlines Flight 77 crashing into the Pentagon. Steve Riskus, I saw the plane hit the building. It did not hit the ground first. It did not hit the roof first. It hit dead center on the edge. Sean Boger, I looked up and I saw a big nose in the wings of the aircraft coming right at us, and I watched it as it hit the building. Donald Bouchreau, retired naval officer, Great Falls residence, right? Okay. At 9:40, I was driving down Washington Boulevard, Route 27, along the side of the Pentagon when the aircraft crossed about 200 yards in front of me and impacted the side of the building. Mike Dobbs, we saw a plane coming toward us for about 10 seconds. It was like watching a train wreck. I was mesmerized. At first, I thought it was trying to crash land, but it was coming in so deliberately, so level. Albert Hemphill, I walked in the office and stood peering out the window, looking at the Pentagon. As I stood there, I instinctively ducked at the extensive loud roar and whine of a jet. The officer stood peering out of the jet engine speeding up. Immediately, the large silver cylinder of an aircraft appeared in my window, coming over my right shoulder as I faced the west side of the Pentagon directly toward the heliport. Stephen McGraw, that's the priest we heard and saw. Danielle O'Brien, we started moving the planes as quickly as we could. Then I noticed the aircraft. It was an unidentified plane to the southwest, still moving at a high rate of speed. I had literally a blip and nothing more. And she worked at the ATC at Dulles Tower. Joel Schumacher, my first thought, what he's not going to make it across to Reagan National Airport. But whoever was flying the plane made no attempt to change direction. It was coming in at a high rate of speed, but not at a steep angle, almost like a heat-seeking missile was locked into its target and staying dead on course. I mean, I could waste the next 20 minutes reading all of this to you. I will link it to the bottom of the description. These are all eyewitnesses who saw the plane crash into the Pentagon. 88 eyewitnesses seeing the plane crash into the Pentagon.
And until they
So why are you listening to Barbara Honegger? She wasn't there. Why, if you're an independent investigator involved in a crime scene, are you going to interview people who weren't at the crime scene, or are you going to interview people at the crime scene?
do, the reason they're being withheld is almost certainly by Logic 101, that they do not show what the official story claims. Okay.
No, what if they're holding the videos to create a diversion within the truth movement, suggesting that a plane didn't crash into the Pentagon? That's a better scenario, right? Because look at the truth movement now, fractured over this position regarding the Pentagon at Shanksville, because there's hardly any debris. Well, there would be hardly any debris when a plane is deliberately crashing into a building at a high rate of speed with 33,000 pounds of fuel on board. Basically, no engines are going to survive. No human bodies are going to survive. They're going to disintegrate upon impact because the plane at that point is a bomb. And yes, it has happened before. And this is something that me and DJ Thermal Detonator has constantly tried to show Jason Burmis, who basically called us trolls. That's why I don't take him seriously. He's not a 9/11 truther. He basically says that, because there's little debris at the Pentagon in Shanksville, just like Honegger, they basically, no plane crash happened here. Well, guess what? Germanwings 8925, 9525, basically crashed into the side of the Alps intentionally. The biggest part of the plane they found was the part of the fuselage. They found no whole bodies. PSA Flight 1771, which deliberately crashed into the ground at speeds up to 700 miles an hour. For those truthers who claim that planes can't go over their max limit, they can. 700 miles an hour. What did they find? The biggest part of the plane they found was half of the door. They found no whole bodies. So it's not like this is like a common anomaly. It's a rare anomaly to see an intentional plane crash It's rare. Yes, it is. And that's the reason why you don't see much plane debris. And this is the reason why people like Barbara Honegger will basically jump on this and say, oh, no planes crashed here. Not understanding that the rail anomalies of an intentional plane crash are rare. And you'll see a common theme: lack of plane debris, no whole body.
So what is some of the evidence in what we have so far that the Pentagon plane wasn't Flight 77? Similar to the World Trade Center plane evidence not being Flight
You didn't
170.
show any. See, that's the thing. You didn't show any evidence about Flight 175 not crashing into the World Trade Center. You basically just said it didn't. That's all you did. You didn't show any documentation. You didn't show any files. You didn't show any photographs. You didn't show any eyewitness documentation regarding Flight 175 landing at an unknown destination, being swapped for a drone aircraft made to look like the plane. You just basically said it. That's all you did. You didn't show any. There's no evidence on a slide. Where is it? Where? I don't see anything. I don't see anything.
And this all speaks to being remote controlled, or at a very minimum, not having the alleged hijackers on board. Okay. And if they were, not being in control of the plane, even if they were. It's a whole nother discussion.
See, she doesn't even know. Did you just not hear her? Listen to that again.
Or at a very minimum, not having the alleged hijackers on board. Okay. And
Okay, again.
not being Flight 170. What is some of the evidence in what we have so far that the Pentagon plane wasn't Flight 77? Similar to the World Trade Center plane evidence not being Flight 175. And this all speaks to being remote controlled, or at a very minimum,
Listen.
not having the alleged hijackers on board. Okay.
Okay, she doesn't even make, she basically just holds that belief, right? Oh, we don't know whether they were hijackers on board. There could have been. This is not a statement of fact. Meanwhile, this is why I think she's more than just some ignorant person espousing fringe conspiracies. But I don't have evidence to show that she's intentionally misinforming people in the truth movement. Well, she does come out of the Hoover Institute, and she is part of the Jim Mars group. So there's that. I mean, there have been earlier truth proponents who basically, like people like Jim Hoffman, who basically asserted that Barbara Honegger is more than just what she deems that she is. She used to work for the State Department. What does that tell you? Served under Reagan at some capacity. October Surprise. You ever read that book? Or you ever read it's free online, PDF form. And now she's all of a sudden comes out of the blue regarding the 9/11 truth movement. And she espouses these fringe conspiracies without any evidence or statement of fact or anything. No documentation, nothing. And people actually believe her because we have so many people in the truth movement willing, desperate to go against the 9/11 Commission report and basically believe anything in contradictory to it. And they won't conduct any type of research whatsoever because it's too time consuming. And basically, they don't dare want to believe that the planes were hijacked. That's all it is, really.
And if they were, not being in control of the plane, even if they were.
See, she doesn't even dispel the fact that they could have been on the plane and the remote control guidance could have been implemented on the plane. She basically just changes her position time and time again, all throughout this 14-minute video. Amazing.
It's a whole nother discussion, the evidence, whether or not the hijackers were on the plane. I'm not going to go into it, but I do.
You can't because basically you basically give that opinion, right? You basically opinionate that, oh, maybe they weren't on the plane. Maybe they were. I don't know. That's basically your whole premise. Your whole premise is that they could have been on the plane, but they weren't in control of the plane. They weren't on the plane because it was remotely controlled. I couldn't tell you, and I don't have the evidence. Oh, I may have the evidence, but I can't go into it with the amount of time allotted to me in the presentation. Get an hour and a half. And so far, everything you said regarding flights 175 and 77 is basically speculation, your opinion, your belief, which you said on the outset of the video. This is your studied opinion. That's not my words. That's your words. It is my belief. That's not my words. That's your words. You said that, Barbara Honegger.
refer you to an excellent book called Hijacking America's Mind, I believe it's called, by Elias
Hijacking,
David.
hijacking what?
Hijacking, I believe it's Hijacking America's Mind by,
Mind. Oh,
yeah, by Elias Davidson. Yeah,
okay.
very
Heard.
important book. Okay, so what's just some of the tip of the
Oh, Elias Davidson, I know that guy.
iceberg of the evidence that the Pentagon plane was in Flight 77? Well, if you can establish that it wasn't by compelling evidence, then by definition, by Logic 101, because we know Flight 77, a 757 American Airlines plane, left Dulles Airport about 8:20 in the morning on 9/11, it had to have been swapped. Okay.
Okay, so what's the evidence that it was swapped? That's the next question, right? A logical deduction would be, all right, if they were swapped, where's the evidence?
All right.
I
So
missed
what
the,
is the
I
most?
missed the logic there. Why did it have to have been swapped?
Well, if the plane, if you understand that there is compelling evidence that the plane at the Pentagon was not the one that,
Where's the compelling evidence? That's the thing. That's the question. In fact, Gage asked the right question. Gage, you're supposed to wait until the presentation is over. Then you ask the questions, not during. That's for future reference. That's if you ever see this video.
left Dulles Airport, but there was a plane at the Pentagon, we know that, then it had to have been landed and swapped.
What
Oh,
evidence?
but you
By
haven't
somebody.
discussed yet the evidence that there were of the plane parts being different than the one that took off.
What evidence is there? And I mean, everyone's saying you should be screaming at this, right?
No, and I'm not going to get into that. I'm
Oh,
going to
okay.
refer.
Oh, of course not. Of course you're not, right? So I'll show you evidence that the plane that took off out of Dulles actually was the plane that crashed into the Pentagon. And basically what we're going to go by is the evidence regarding the National Transportation Safety Board flight data study, which is available on PDF form, right? So this is the radar flight path. Now, radar flight path, basically, as you can see, here is where the plane took off out of. This is the radar data. Basically, there's the loop that people saying, oh no, this is actually the loop right here, where the autopilot is actually disconnected. And it shows you, look, I'll even blow it up. Okay, regarding here, shows you. A, departure from Washington Dulles Airport. B, reached assigned altitude of 35,000 feet. C, deviation from assigned course, assumed takeover point, where they think the hijacking happened. D, airplane heading east. That's not supposed to where the plane's going, right? E, change course to northeast. Autopilot disconnected. So this is where the autopilot's disconnected. Autopilot's connected at this point, right over here. So the autopilot's disconnected. That means the pilot's in control of the plane. And then re-engaged. Okay, so I understand. All right. So the autopilot's, it was disconnected, then re-engaged. F, autopilot disengaged, which is basically just a few short miles with the loop. See the loop? Because they were going over the Pentagon, made the loop, and then descended into the Pentagon, in which I showed you the evidence of the eyewitnesses, right? And now here's the pressure altitude, okay? Takeoff, 820, A, departure from Washington. I mean, all this is basically the departure, right? Right there to the crash. Topographical map, the background of the plane. This is the loop they created. Look at this tight loop, right? Not so tight, God's sakes. And of course, this is the data that was transcribed from the flight data recorder. And at no point does it show that this plane actually landed somewhere and was swapped, and shows you right down to the millisecond. This is transcribed from the National Transportation Safety Board, right there. Does Barbara Honegger show any of that? So what happens when the transponder is turned off, right? The transponder, basically, it's a device that listens for a signal and responds with information about the airplane, including the ATC assigned code, altitude information, and additional aircraft info for certain equipment. But there are two ways the ATC can watch a plane, even when the transponder is turned off: primary radar and secondary surveillance radar. And that's what I showed you in the NTSB report, right? The plane radar, that's the radar coming from the ground. Now the transponder is interrogated by the secondary radar. And then the response is listened for, right, from the ground. Even with no transponder, the aircraft can still be tracked by its primary radar from air traffic control. They could still see the plane, but you can't see the altitude, right? It's just normal radar that is good at seeing airplane-sized objects and not so great at seeing weather, and occasionally a spot like a flock of birds on the radar because it gives heat. The primary radar is what provides the blip on the radar. Remember when I read the information from Daniel O'Brien, where she said she saw the blip and tracks the airplane, that blip, but it was going so fast that she thought it was a military plane, because no plane really goes that fast near the airspace and as low as it is. That's right. That would be right. Ronald Reagan Airport's right there too. And the plane was going so fast, it wasn't like it was landing. The problem with radar is that it only works so far from a radar transmitter. And the further away you are, the higher you are, you must be seen by the radar. But this plane wasn't so high. It was low. And so that's where Barbara Honegger gets basically everything wrong, is that basically she just asserts things and she doesn't show you evidence for anything she suggested. I just did. And it contradicts everything she says about 77. She just said that 77 doesn't fit the markings of what happened at the Pentagon. And that reason alone is the evidence that the plane was swapped. That's her evidence. You believe that?
For people to my behind the smoke curtain.
You're just
this is-
saying, if that's the case, then certainly
Yes. Mhm,
it
yeah.
would mean they were swapped. Okay.
Yes. Well, by definition, if the plane that left the airport is not the one that ended up at the Pentagon, it was
That's a big if, though.
Gage is actually asking good questions. Right, that's a big if. You're damn right. The next question is, what evidence do you have that the plane was swapped?
I mean, that's not the subject of today's discussion.
No, it is. It actually is, because her presentation is suggesting it.
But
Well, allow me to
I'm-
give you the evidence, which I'm about to do.
Oh, please.
Okay. Okay. So the first piece of evidence, and I go into detail into this evidence in behind the smoke curtain.
Our evidence is her presentation. Come on, man. You got truth movement. You got to start questioning these people. Her evidence is the presentation she made years ago in Seattle behind the smoke curtain.
Which is on YouTube, and it is my major documentary on this.
It's a 3-hour presentation. So my evidence for showing that the plane was swapped and it wasn't Flight 70 crash at Pentagon is my presentation. Go watch it. Can you imagine this? Can you imagine going to court suggesting that? Your Honor, Flight 77 didn't crash at the Pentagon. It was swapped. The plane was swapped for a drone made to look like Flight 77. The judge says, what's your evidence, right? Well, my presentation, go watch it. I mean, wow.
Pentagon attack. But anyway, this is just a few of the tips of the iceberg from behind the smoke curtain. First, FAA's own Indianapolis air traffic control radar operators saw the blip of Flight 77 descend at least 6,000 feet before the turn back east.
That's right. I just read you that report from Daniel O'Brien. She basically says that the blip she saw, because the transponder is turned off, which I showed you with the radar, the cockpit, the NTSB report, right? I just showed it to you. I even provided the description. Okay, you can read it for yourself. She basically says the blip was basically the plane, but it was going so fast because at that altitude, planes are usually landing because Ronald Reagan Airport is right there. But this plane was going so fast, so she basically thought it was a military plane. I bet you that's what she's going to say.
and reported the same to Air Force Search and Rescue. However, the official radar does not have that very plane, its blip, descend until after the turn back east, and because the same physical plane cannot do both.
Why? No, that's not what Daniel O'Brien said. And I'm going to have to read you her quote. All right. And this is a problem with people like you, Barbara Honegger, because you take people out of context. Okay. So I'm going to read you an ABC News report. The air traffic controls recall 9/11. Okay. So I'm going to share a screen you this report. Okay. So here it is. Okay. Air traffic controls recall 9/11. Air traffic controller Daniel O'Brien is now ready to talk about September 11th. This report is January 6, 2006. It was a normal day. It was a beautiful day in the Washington, D.C. area. Crystal clear. It was a nice temperature. But it was also a day when O'Brien's calm demeanor handling aircraft at Dulles International Airport in Virginia would be put fully to the test. Okay. She was assigned to the radar room, and at 8:25 a.m., she handled the routine on-time departure of American Flight 77. The plane that 1 hour and 12 minutes later would crash the Pentagon. She finished her instructions by saying, "Good luck." It's chilling. It's chilling, she says. I usually say good day as I ask an aircraft to switch to another frequency or have a nice flight, but never good luck. Okay. John Carr, president of the National Air Traffic Control Association, said he learned what was going on just before the second plane hit the tallest building in New York. At Dulles Tower, O'Brien saw the TV pictures from New York and headed back to her post to help other planes quickly land. Right? O'Brien asked the controller sitting next to her, Tom Howell, if he saw it too. What did he see? Let's go back. We started moving the planes as quickly as we could. Then I noticed the aircraft. It was an unidentified plane to the southwest of Dulles, moving at a very high rate of speed. I had literally a blip and nothing more, right? Because the transponder is turned off. She doesn't know the markings of the plane. It basically just shows the plane, Flight 77, as radar, right? Oh my God, it looks like it's heading to the White House. I was yelling, we've got a target heading right for the White House. At a speed of about 500 miles an hour, the plane was heading straight for what is known as P-56, Protected Airspace 56, which covers the White House and the Capitol, not the Pentagon. That's what troop movers basically say. Oh, that airspace is protected. No. Air protected airspace, because Ronald Reagan Airport's right there. The speed, the maneuverability, the way he turned, we all thought in the radar room, all of us experienced air traffic controllers that was a military plane. You don't fly a 757 in that manner. It's unsafe. She won't say that. Honegger's not going to say that. She basically will only concentrate on this because she's taking it out of context. That's what we get from a military plane. That's right. You would get that from a military plane because it's going at a high rate of speed. A commercial aircraft doesn't fly 500 miles an hour at low altitudes of 3,000 feet right near the airport. They're basically trying to land. This plane is trying to crash. What does she say? You don't fly a 757 in that matter. It's unsafe. Exactly right. Because guess what? The pilot of Flight 77 didn't care about safe or safety. He was intentionally crashing the plane, killing everybody on board. But Barbara Honegger won't tell you that. She'll basically take people's words out of context. She won't tell you what she said at the end there.
The same physical plane cannot be seen on radar to both.
Why can it not be seen on radar? It actually is seen on radar. Okay? It actually can be seen on radar. It just isn't identified as Flight 77 because the transponder is turned off. But the radar can track from the plane at the moment of takeoff to the destination. That's what the radar track shows. And that's what's in the National Transportation Safety Report, which you didn't care to read. You basically took Daniel O'Brien out of context and basically said the radar report is wrong without showing any evidence of why it's wrong.
Descend before the turn, and also descend only after the turn, to keep its high altitude and descend only after the turn, according to the official radar. So one.
No, that doesn't, what the official radar doesn't suggest any of that. And I'm going to provide it in the description box where everybody can see. From the moment of takeoff to the impact of the Pentagon. It doesn't show the plane actually landing anywhere. It doesn't show the plane actually making that close return at a high altitude that you suggest.
One of them or both are wrong, but
No, you're wrong. I showed it in this video. I showed it where you're wrong.
the evidence is overwhelming to me that the.
But and again, if you're a truther, you're sitting there, all right, so where's this documentation that she's showing? Oh, wait, her documentation is the presentation she made in Seattle in 2013 behind the smoke curtain. Holy mackerel, guys. Jean Laratonda, Sandra Jalami, you guys, this is who you back. This is who you listen to, right? Because this is all we got in the lawyers committee. We got to be behind these people. Therefore, the truth. No, they're not. No, they're not. It took me literally, seconds to show that she's wrong. I provided documentation. I could provide files. I could provide eyewitness evidence for the evidence, which is contradictory to her assertions. Remember what she said at the beginning of the video. Again, I sound like a broken record. It is her studied opinion. It is her belief.
Official radar is wrong. Another piece of evidence, American Airlines' own press release that they put out on or shortly after September 14th, 2001, right after the alleged Flight 77 black boxes, the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, those two so-called black boxes that are actually bright orange, were found allegedly in the Pentagon rubble.
They weren't allegedly found, they were found. It's reported by the people who found them. In fact, it was an Arlington County firefighter and a EMS that basically found it, Brian Morovitz and Carlton Burkhammer. They actually found the cockpit voice recorder. The flight data recorder. The cockpit voice recorder was badly damaged. Couldn't get any information from it, but they found the flight data recorder, which is what the National Transportation Safety Report, which I showed, is from.
American Airlines put out
It's not alleged. It was actually found.
Official press release saying when they saw the information about the cockpit voice recorder, they put out an official press release saying this is not from any American Airlines 7.
No, that's not what they said. In fact, there's no, you're just making stuff up now. The cockpit voice recorder that they found, the NTSB later reported that the data was badly damaged and that you couldn't retrieve any data from the cockpit voice recorder. So I don't know what you were referring to regarding the cockpit voice recorder because they couldn't transcribe any data from it because it was badly damaged. So Barbara Honegger, my goodness.
157
Really?
on 9/11. So if that was the cockpit voice recorder, which is in the tail of the plane right next to the flight data recorder, and they're both in the same.
Again, why don't you show us the news reports regarding this that you basically said exist? Why don't you show us? She can't. Because it doesn't exist. And this is the same claim made by Rob Balsamo and Pause for 9/11 Truth. They basically say, they found that the transcription of the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder doesn't match Flight 77. No, they basically just made it up. They ain't show any evidence for it. That's why they haven't been relevant since 2012, 11, 10 years ago. If their website, dead. I think Rob Balsamo, he died last year too. So the people running those forums, basically they're not providing anything new. Barbara Honegger isn't providing anything new. You can't take anything they say to a court of law because everything they say is basically either fictitious or it's just demonstrably false.
Plane, then the flight data recorder wasn't from Flight 77 either.
So she's basically saying that the cockpit voice recorder, which by the way was badly damaged, they didn't get any data from it. By default, the flight data recorder is false. Just, you have to start, if you're in the truth movement, you basically have to start questioning the motives of Barbara Honegger.
All right, that's number 2. Number 3, and this is just the last tip of the iceberg. The very first violent event at the Pentagon, there is overwhelming evidence, in my opinion, was
See, right. See, overwhelming evidence, in my opinion. Let me repeat. Let's
that's number 2. Number 3, and this is just the last tip of the iceberg. The very first violent event at the Pentagon, there is overwhelming evidence, in my opinion.
There's overwhelming evidence, in my opinion. Oh my God, she's basically telling you that the evidence is basically my opinion. Right there, that's a full stop. Anything she says from this point on has to be taken with a huge, gigantic, granular grain of salt.
Opinion was at 9:30. That's almost 8 minutes before the official story.
6. So, again, are you going by April Gallup? She wasn't even outside the building. She was inside the building. And she sued American Airlines and Osama bin Laden in her second lawsuit. And why did she do that? Well, according to her, basically, this is a quote, I got to cover my ass and look out for my kid.
Impact time of almost 9:38, 9:37 and 46 seconds. And it was due to inside pre-placed explosives, which is the real story also at the World Trade Center. All right. Now,
What evidence? Where's the documentation? Where's the files? Where's the eyewitness evidence? Where's all this photograph? Anything? Or do we have to go back to your presentation, which is 3 hours long?
at 9:30 in the morning, the incoming plane that is held by the official story to have been flight.
Which is not backed by any type of documentation, right? So the plane, Flight 77, actually impacted into the Pentagon 9:36. Was it 9:37 and something seconds, right? Now, for her evidence, she actually shows the one clock that was off by like a couple of seconds. But there's another clock which she doesn't show that basically stopped at 9:36. She won't show you that clock. Like clocks, these wind-up clocks, they can't be wrong by a couple of minutes. And the radar and the NTSB report and the flight data reports basically all suggest a plane crashing at 9:37.
77 was still at least 30 miles from Washington, D.C. and the Pentagon. It was only immediately after that first violent event at the Pentagon at 9:30, which was inside.
Which is not reported by anybody. Not a single person. April Gallup claims to have said, oh, there was an explosion out of my computer when I turned it on. Guess what? That's not backed by any independent eyewitness report. In fact, the eyewitness reports I'm going to provide below, you can read all their reports. There's no initial explosion before the plane hit the Pentagon. Nobody reports this. Nobody in the Pentagon reports this. Nobody.
Of the West Wall that stopped April Gallup's major 9/11 Pentagon witness, stopped her wristwatch at exactly 9:30, and she's kept that wristwatch in her safe deposit box for evidence when it goes to court.
And guess what? She basically tried to sue Donald Rumsfeld, George Bush, Joint Chiefs of Staff Richard Myers, and in an initial lawsuit, and in her second lawsuit, she added Osama bin Laden and American Airlines because she's got to cover her ass and look out for a kid. And both lawsuits were thrown out. In fact, they were such frivolous lawsuits. The judge regarding the second lawsuit basically fined her lawyers for producing such a ridiculously frivolous lawsuit. That was 2012. So there's no future lawsuits from April Gallup. So I don't know what Barbara Honegger's asserting.
It was immediately after 9:30, not after the official story alleged impact time, that major government, military, and airline responses took place. Just after that, for instance, The Secret Service, right after that, finally rushed Bush out of the Florida school in an emergency basis. Right after that, all United flights were suddenly ordered to land.
No, that's not what happened. My goodness. So after the attack of the South Tower, basically Bush was ushered into a separate classroom where he saw the TV, and basically they left the school. They boarded Air Force One. I think they went to Alabama or Arkansas. Don't quote me on the state where he gave a first press conference, and then he refueled Air Force One because they were flying around. They didn't know where to land. They couldn't get clearance for land because Secret Service basically was suggesting that the airplane stay in the air. And they were going to go to, I think, initially near Cheyenne Mountain or something like that, near Colorado. But Bush wanted to go back to Washington, D.C., and they said, no, it's too dangerous because, Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon. So they basically evacuated the Pentagon initially. They evacuated the Capitol. They evacuated the White House because these were all targets that were reported to have been targets in the years prior to 9/11. So they basically got out of the of these areas, and basically Bush couldn't land anywhere. And that's the conspiracy, right? Because if he can't land anywhere and he can't talk to Vice President Dick Cheney because the phone call kept coming in and out, and there wasn't a consistent phone call, they couldn't give a true shoot down order, even before Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. There's your continuity of government, right? Because guess what? Vice President is not military authorized at the chain of command in the military to authorize a shoot down. Without, it goes by the president and then the Secretary of Defense and then the Joint Chiefs. If the continuity of government is broken. With Bush out of the picture and Rumsfeld outside helping people at the Pentagon, guess who's in charge of the country? Dick Cheney. He's at the PIOC. Bush lands, it's much too late because all the planes crashed everywhere, and the shoot down order was given at 10:36. But according to Norman Mineta and according to Andrew Card, who at the PIOC, not Andrew Card, Baker, the highest ranking White House official, Douglas Baker, I think, White House chief of staff, he heard Cheney basically say on the phone, and this is 9:30, I think, at this point, where he says he's going to give a shoot down order. That didn't come from Bush. So he broke the chain of command. You ain't going to hear that from Barbara Honegger.
And American Airlines Flight right after. And right after that, the New York Stock Exchange was ordered closed down. And you can see a lot more of this evidence of everything that happened right after that first explosion inside.
What does the stock exchange have to do with anything happening at the Pentagon?
Outside ring of the Pentagon at 9:30 that stopped April Gallup's watch. You can see all of those 9:30 entries, or right after 9:30 to 9:32 entries in the terror timeline on pages 413 to 416.
Wrong. So everything you basically said in this video was your studied opinion. You said that twice. And you showed no documentation, no news articles, no files, no pictures, no eyewitness evidence. I did. And it was easy to do. Relatively easy. Anybody could do it. Everything you said in this presentation was demonstrably false. And the assertions you made, basically, some of them you basically just made up. Some of them was just plain disinformation. You basically took people out of context, like Daniel O'Brien, and you basically referred to April Gallup, who in her second lawsuit sued Osama bin Laden American Airlines. Why would she sue Osama bin Laden American Airlines? She doesn't believe a plane at the Pentagon. At this point in time, why would we believe anything you say, Barbara Honegger? I'm gonna try and find um, the article for you. Here, okay, I got it. So I'm gonna share this with you and then end the video, right? And this is amazing. I mean, really. Okay, from ABA Journal. This is dated September 12, 2011. September 11th survivor who claims U.S. allowed attack, what attack, has sued Dick Cheney, Osama bin Laden, and American Airlines. Let me blow this up so you can see it, right? A little bit bigger. April Gallup is leaving no stone unturned in her effort to recover money. That's what this is about. After surviving the September 11th attacks on the Pentagon, April Gallup has filed suit against Dick Cheney, alleging the United States allowed or arranged the September 11th attacks. She has also sued Osama bin Laden, a bank, and American Airlines. Why would she sue bin Laden and American Airlines if she doesn't believe a plane hit the Pentagon or that Al Qaeda, who hijacked the planes, in general? Listen to what she says. Gallup has pushed the button to turn on a computer when the plane hit the Pentagon. Gallup's 10-week-old son, Elisha, was with her at the office, first day back from maternity leave. Gallup tells the Post she didn't see any aircraft wreckage and there was no fire from the jet fuel. Meanwhile, I just played evidence of Brian Birdwell, who basically was burned by the jet fuel of the plane. He was there. I was 50 feet from the impact zone. The engine should have been in my lap. Her lawsuit against Dick Cheney contends the Pentagon was destroyed not by a plane crash, but possibly by a missile or explosives on the orders of the U.S. leaders. Well, then that would mean that she shouldn't be suing Osama bin Laden and American Airlines. However, Gallup has sued several Muslim defendants, including Osama bin Laden, as well as a bank accused of laundering money for terrorists. She is in negotiations to settle a suit against American Airlines. She defends the suit against Americans, although she doesn't believe it's played at the Pentagon. Why? Why is she suing it? This is her reason. If there are claims out there that these things took place that day, the airlines are liable, she tells the Post. If they are liable, I'm one of the victims. I have to do that for my son. Bingo. Because what she's doing this for is money. And what she says regarding, oh, I don't think a plane hit the Pentagon, the engine should have been in my lap. But if there are other theories out there that could be true, like the plane actually crashed in the Pentagon, hey, that involves me too, because, hey, I'm a survivor. I mean, it's incredible that the truth movement actually will believe people like Barbara Honegger and April Gallup, who are basically just doing it for money, doing it for fame. And they're misinforming people in the truth movement on purpose. Why? That's the next question, right? Because then it would mean that Barbara Honegger is basically not just someone who's profiteering or trying to remain relevant in the truth movement. Now she's something nefariously, something far more dangerous.